All right, we are at the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. Hello and welcome to this microfocus webinar. It's Retain Archiving for Email, Social, and Mobile for Education in specific. My name is Sheldon Mills. I'm a Field Marketing Manager here at Microfocus, and I'm here with Q Mangus, a Solution Marketing Manager here at Microfocus. Kind of tongue-tied here because we used to be Guava, now Microfocus, so the titles have changed just a teeny bit. I wanted to start off by thanking everyone for stopping by our booth this year at ACPE. It was a great event. If you didn't stop by, that's okay. We're going to quickly recap what was said, but it's a lot more information about archiving and specifically for education organizations. We're going to have a Q&A session today addressing a lot of the frequent questions we get regarding archiving, best practices, and retain, especially as it pertains to educational organizations, schools, districts. So I'll be fielding the questions and Q will be answering them. We have a number of, I guess, the frequent questions we want to get through. However, if you have questions come up throughout the webinar, please share them with us as those are the most important ones. Put those in the Q&A chat panel. Q and I will be sure to address those as we go along. Um, and how you do that is just click on the chat or QA icon and you can type those in. Q?
Thanks, everyone. And yeah, it was great to be at ACPE. I'm pretty sure, looking at the people here, that you were all there that were there. So yeah, it was great. We had good weather a couple of days, right, and then rain the others. So that's about how it goes up there. So anyway, I'm excited to bring this information to you. Anyone who, like I said, didn't attend ACPE, this is great information as well, just for other education organizations about what you should be doing for archiving. So yeah, we're really excited to bring this to you, and I think you'll benefit from it.
Okay, so I guess let's just jump right in. Let's get going, huh?
Sounds great.
Okay. So, first question, we get this a lot. I guess the groundwork. What is archiving and how does it affect me, especially relating to education?
So this is good because this is something that we get a lot. Is they just kind of want to know what archiving is, and so I kind of wanted to start out with that. You saw the topic of information archiving or unified archiving. We also like to call it. It's this archiving. It's kind of evolved. So you probably know it as like email archiving, right? And so um, if you've been an email administrator, network administrator, or in IT for a while, you know that there's been this idea of email archiving, that you need to be able to store your email and be able to access that email, and you do that to manage your data, to be able to comply with regulations. So that's the idea of email archiving, but it's really evolved, and it's evolved into what we now call information archiving. So it's more than just email. It still has email archiving, but now it includes all of your electronic communication. Social media and mobile is included in that as well. So what has happened is there's been a big shift, as we know, that for your school and other companies that are experiencing this as well, is that you have staff, you have teachers, you even have students, depending on the type of school you have, that are using mobile devices. They're using mobile devices to email, they're using it to text each other, and they're also using social media. I would imagine that your school or university has a social media account. They probably have multiple social media accounts. And so because of this shift, the requirements have changed. It means that you need to be archiving other things other than just email. And that's where this concept of information archiving comes from, is that you need to be able to archive, of course, your email. You need to be able to archive social media and mobile communication, and you need to be able to easily access that. And so that's the idea. I wanted to give everybody some background on this because it's asked that, is that's what archiving is. It's this ability to take your information, store it separate from the messaging systems, and have the ability to easily access that. And so it affects your school because you have staff or even students that are communicating more than likely with email, also with mobile, and then you probably have a social media account. So you need to be able to have oversight on that and to be able to archive it. And that's what information archiving will do for you.
So specifically to education, what we get this a lot. What regulations affect what and how my organization archives?
So good. Here's a few that just take note of. And so for you guys that are in education, it's different. Meaning other companies need to archive, but it's more about managing data. And there's some things that have to do with court. Everybody's subject to the FRCP, which is basically Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, that say you need to be able to produce electronic communication in case of court. But because you're in education, especially if you're a public school, you're subject to a few things. You're subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and that means that if anybody comes and requests records, and if you're a public entity, whether that's federal or local or state government, you need to be able to produce communication data that pertains to that request. And there are state sunshine laws that are similar to that. And so each of your states, I know principally the people here in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and parts of California, but they have laws in those states that are similar to FOIA that basically say you need to be able to produce information if it's requested. So that's part of why you need to be able to archive, is that you need to be able to quickly produce this information in case of an archiving request or an information request. Then you have FERPA. And so what FERPA does is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. It basically, I'm imagining that all of you are familiar with this one. If you're not, just realize that it's a federal law to protect privacy of student education records. And what it does is it allows parents for those who have minors to be able to inspect and review an education record of a student. The reason why that applies to archiving is that this information can be transmitted via email or via mobile, but you need to have oversight on that, and it needs to be done in a secure way. And so archiving can help you have access to that information, improve, and show how you communicated it. And so these that you see here on the screen really, to sum it up in a nutshell, means that you need to be able to store your information and you need to be able to quickly access it.
So, what should a school or district or university be archiving?
So that's the big thing. These regulations, as we talked about, really mandate that you need to be archiving at the base level is email, and then of course social media and mobile. And when we're talking about that, I wanted to show this slide here, is that most organizations probably have an email archive. This was a survey that was done recently by Osterman Research, but very few are archiving their social media or their mobile communication. However, those are the other things that really need to be done. So if your school has any kind of social media, so say they have a Facebook account, you have a Twitter feed, Twitter account, any kind, Google Plus, etc. You need to be able to archive that information as well. That's your school social media accounts, and that's very important to be able to have oversight on that. And then mobile communication as well. So if your staff is using mobile devices, whether that's something that they're bringing themselves, a BYOD type situation, or something that your school has issued, you need to be able to have oversight on those communications. And so those are the big things that you need to remember. Those are the big three: email, your social media, and mobile. And the reason being is that the regulations are mandating it, and you should, just to protect your school, you should have oversight on that stuff.
So you mentioned it briefly, but do you have any advice for archiving mobile devices, and specifically, what do you do about BYOD, like bringing your own device?
Yeah, so mobile's a beast, isn't it? I mean, we know that mobile's everywhere. You're probably dealing with that, and it's exploded over the past few years. It's almost become cliche because there's been so much talk about mobile. But I'm guessing that everyone on this call has teachers or other staff that are using mobile devices right now. And those mobile communications, if they're communicating with other staff members or with students or with parents, you need to have oversight on that. And it needs to be viewed the same as social media or email for archiving. And then so really at the base of it, I would say the advice I would give you is that you need to have at the base level a communication policy. And this communication policy would state what is appropriate on email, what's appropriate on social media, and what's appropriate on mobile. If you don't have that, I would suggest that you get that today. You do that right now. And that policy needs to be clear, needs to be concise, and there needs to be training on that. And then you need to be able to have oversight. You need to have a way to enforce that policy, and that's where mobile communication archiving would come into play. Is that you can have oversight by archiving those messages. Now, I understand that you're probably in a situation where you have staff that are bringing their own device and they want to access email, they want to be able to use that for communication. Well, that's okay. And there's a good solution for that, and that's something that's called dual persona, which is basically say they're bringing in their personal device, they want to text and call their friends and their family or whomever else they can. They use the personal side of that. Let's take an iPhone, for example. They'd use iMessage or they'd use the native dialer to do that. Well, there's also a solution, and I'm going to talk more about that later, but I just want you to be aware that there are solutions out there to where you can assign a separate persona or a separate phone number to that device so that they can call and text. Employees can call and text using that business number, and you can have oversight on that. So that's what the dual persona is. Personal stays personal. Um, Official business can be official, and you can have oversight on that. That's what dual persona is for. So that would be the advice I'd give you for mobile. Have that policy, have oversight. If you have BYOD, have that dual persona.
Okay, I guess going we done email and mobile. About social media, what do you do about the school's social media accounts?
So once again, I'm imagining that for most of you, this is something that is concerning you, or at least somebody in your school is concerned about this, and that is um, what are people posting to your social media account, meaning your school's social media account? How are people communicating with that? So once again, my advice is to have that policy. So if there's teachers that are posting to your school social media account, what is appropriate and what is not, you need to outline that. And then you need to be able to enforce that. You need to also be able to have monitoring of your social media. So you need to have alerts for keywords, questions, or maybe personal identifiable info. Once again, talking about FERPA. So if any of that kind of stuff comes across, you need a solution that will alert you to that. And then so at the base, you need to make sure you're archiving any of your school's social media account. I know it says corporate on the screen, but the idea is a school social media account. And then if there's any staff that's has a social media account that's used for official purposes, that should be archived. And then, of course, anything that's posted to your school's social media account needs to be archived, and then you need to be able to access that. And then, of course, you need to have that monitoring for keywords so that you can know what's going on in your social media. So that's what I would say to do with your school social media accounts. Archive it, have that oversight, and have a policy.
Awesome, thank you. How about we jump into some retain questions? So, what does retain archive?
So retain archives, let me flip here. So yeah, retain, we like to call it retain unified archiving, and I'll explain why. We retain archives email, social media, and mobile, and it archives it into one central archive, and that's why we call it unified archiving. So it supports multi-platform email, social media, and mobile communication. It archives that communication in a central archive that's easily accessible. It can be searched. You can perform eDiscovery. And once again, we call it unified archiving because you have one solution for all of your communication. You don't have to have separate solutions, which can create silos of data, which can create complications by having to search different solutions to find different messages. With Retain, you can search one solution, bring everything back. And so that's what Retain archives is, that multi-platform email, social media, and mobile communication in one central archive.
So, how does retain work with email, Office 365, Exchange, Gmail, GroupWise? I'm betting a lot of, since it's education, a lot around Gmail.
Yeah, absolutely. In talking with, especially there with you guys at ACPE, there was a lot of people using Gmail, but that's not the only thing. There's also Office 365. Um, there was some Exchange people as well. But the idea with retain is that there's different pieces. As I talked about, there's the email piece, the social piece, and the mobile piece. The email piece in particular, um, what's great about retain is it archives multi-platform emails simultaneously. So what that means, and I know this is the case in a lot of schools, is that if you have two separate or three separate email systems, so say you're running Office 365 and you're running Gmail, you can archive both of those at the same time. So if you have, let's say you have your staff on Office 365 and your students on Gmail and you want to archive that, you can. Or if you're moving from one email platform to another, say you're moving from an on-prem solution like Exchange to an Office 365 or to a Gmail, Retain will archive that, your legacy email and your new email, and it'll look the same to your end users. They're not going to worry about that because when they access their archive, their old email will look the same as their new email. And what's great is that we archive the email, the attachments, the folder structures, the calendars, appointments, all of that's archived into the one central archive. And your end users have access to their personal archive. Administrators have access to the entire archive, and you can create named users. So if you have administrators that or other users that want to use it, like a legal team, or you have auditors that want to access the archive, you, meaning those in IT, don't have to do it for them. You can grant them rights so that they can do it. Also with it, you have built-in eDiscovery and publishing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. There's redaction included, so if you need to take stuff out that you don't want part of the public record, you can. You can export that to PDF as well. And then there's a few ways to access the archive. I'm going to touch on that, but they can access it via web UI. They can access it via an email plugin. So right from Outlook, they can click on the archive and see that and search it right from there. And then there's even a mobile app to be able to access it. Now, in particular with Gmail, um, to kind of contrast it with Google Vault, what's built into Gmail, um, Retain has a platform agnostic unified archive, meaning that it archives more than just email, where Google Vault only does the Gmail. Um, it can archive other platforms as well. You can have just custom integration. So that means you can integrate with your mobile, your social media. You can do a lot of different things there. You have the eDiscovery tools that are built in, those search tools to be able to quickly and easily get to your information. You can export in multiple formats. You can have an on-premise archive if you want, or in a cloud unified archive or a cloud archive as well. And then another thing is that if you have an inactive user and you want to keep them archived, they can be archived and retained without having to pay for the Gmail license. You can use that Gmail license for somebody else. So I know there's a few people on Gmail that are on this call, so I wanted to review that. And then just as a reminder, in particular with Gmail, Retain archives Gmail messages, Gmail notes, appointments, and calendar items. And another thing just to be aware of, if you need to ever restore back to the live inbox, say that it's archived and retained and then a user accidentally deletes it out of their live box, and a user can do it themselves. They could restore it right to there, or you could do it for them, and it's a quick and easy process. And one of the Gartner Magic Quadrant reports for enterprise information archiving, it actually talked about how Micro Focus and the retained solution is one of the few solutions that has native Gmail archiving support instead of SMTP. So yeah, for those of you on Gmail, that's how it works there. Let me show you a few things. Here's that email plugin that I was talking about. I wanted to touch on this so you can know how it works with email. So if they need to access their archive, they just click on that. They can search right from Outlook. Here's the web access archive viewer. So if you don't want to have them have a plugin from Outlook, you can give them a URL that go to that. There's single sign-in, so they don't have to have a separate login for Retain. They just use their same login. The folder structure is replicated, and so they'd see exactly what it looks like in their email system. This is actually my archive, so you can see that my folders are replicated. You can see my messages, etc. So that's really email archiving, how Retain works with that. We make it easy for your end users to access their personal archive, and that goes the same for the other platforms as well for email and social, or excuse me, for social media and mobile. The folder structure is replicated over. They can access it via the Outlook plugin or the web app, and yeah, that we support multi-platforms simultaneously as well.
There's a lot.
No doubt.
So let's move over a little bit to mobile archiving, how that works with Retain.
So yeah, as we talked about, Retain Mobile there's three different ways in which we can archive with mobile. And so let me just touch on each one of those, and then I want you to think about how it could apply to you. So if you have BlackBerry devices, I know there's not as many as there once was, but they're still out there. If you have BlackBerry devices, we tie directly to the BlackBerry Enterprise Service, and we archive all SMS, MMS, phone call logs, BBM messages, and PIN messages, and we pull those into that same unified archive. For BBM protected, which is an IM type tool similar to like a WhatsApp, but it's an enterprise version, and it's called BBM Enterprise now. What we do there is we integrate directly with the app, and BBM Enterprise works on iOS, Android, and BlackBerry. We tie directly to the app and pull those encrypted messages down and archive them. It's a great solution for those who may want to be able to communicate, and this is a great solution for BYOD as well. If you want to just have a solution where you give your teachers the ability to communicate using something similar to what WhatsApp, but for enterprise, that's what BBM Enterprise does. And then we can archive that. Okay, so then with Android, we would tie directly to Android. There's an app that sits on the phone, and it pulls all the phone call logs and text messages down. So that's ideal if it's corporate owned, or school owned, I should say. And that would be the same with BlackBerry. Both BlackBerry and Android, that solution is if it's school owned, because it's going to pull everything down. Now for iOS, we don't do anything on the native side. That's all locked down. Apple has locked that down. So we can't touch iMessage or the native dialer. However, what we can do is we have a partnership with CellTrust. And what CellTrust does is they place an app onto your phone. And through that app, you can call, you can text, and send multimedia messages, and you can record voice calls. And so what happens with CellTrust is you put that app on the phone, it creates a dual persona. So now with CellTrust, you can call with a separate phone number, you can text, and it can even record voice calling if you want that. And then it integrates with Retain, and it archives that. Retain does. It archives all that CellTrust information, and that can be deployed on iOS or Android. So that's great for BYOD because now they can leave their personal stuff on the personal side, and then the official communication they can use this app. And now if you really want to lock it down, and so let's say you do have iOS devices that are school owned, you can turn off iMessage and the phones. That's done through an MDM or an EMM solution, and then you can only have them use the CellTrust app. And then, of course, we have oversight on that. And so that's mobile communication in a nutshell. We have a number of organizations that are using that. Like I said, the big one is that because BYOD is so big, the example I'll give is that we have a number of schools that are using it that way, that if their teachers are bringing their own phones, they deploy that CellTrust app. They're allowed to call and text using that app, and they have oversight on that, and then they keep their personal stuff separate. So that's really how it works with Retain Mobile, and it all goes into that same central archive with the email and the social media.
Awesome. Let's hit social now then.
So yeah, finally, it only makes sense. That finishes out this circle, right? So Retain archives these social media platforms. So we'll just start from the top: Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, Flickr, Vimeo, and YouTube. So what's cool there is, let's start with everything but YouTube and Vimeo. Retain integrates with Archive Social to be able to pull down all of the communication for those platforms. It will take pictures, GIFs, other data formats, any comments, any postings, um, and it will pull it into Retain and archive that. And it stays in its original format, so you can go back and see it. You can search it. There's also alerts, so you can turn on the ability to monitor for keywords or questions. So if you have certain keywords, maybe there's terms that may be violent or harmful or inappropriate, you can turn that on, and then it'll alert you if that stuff's going on. And then it will also archive it. And then for YouTube and Vimeo, it actually archives the actual video. So if you have YouTube videos that are out there, you can go back and see your old ones because it's going to be archived and you can see any comments that have been posted there. What's great too is that we can actually connect to a social media account without the login info. And what that means is that you don't have to collect credentials. You just have a person or the account that needs to be logged into. You have that logged in, and then you give them a URL. They click on that. It authenticates to that social media account. It'll just say the Archive Social wants to access your social media. You know, you've seen that with other apps, right? Do you allow this? You just hit allow, and then from then on, Retain is archiving your social media communication, and that's done on or off the network. And then here's an example of just some of the platforms and a search using that archive social, and it's also those are also pulled into Retain with that same unified archive with email and mobile communication.
So we've hit all three of them. How about archiving used to kind of be a like a it's this vault you hope you never have to touch, right? But it's
Yeah,
quickly changing. So the e-discovery is becoming more and
yeah,
more
you
important,
access it, right?
and being able to pull it out and get it. So how does Retain help with that?
So Retain has, so this is something that is different about Retain from other archiving solutions is that Retain includes built-in eDiscovery. The ability to search your archive is built in. You don't have to have another solution. You don't have to go out and buy some kind of search or eDiscovery tool. It's built into Retain. Um, the Retain has redaction included. You can do those searches. You can place litigation holds on mailboxes, or you can do it per mailbox, per person. You can do it per team. You can do it globally. You have the ability to do that search for open records. You can play. There's an audit trail, so you can see who's accessed the archive, who's done what they've searched. You have those permissions, as I touched on, so that you can go back and um, grant rights to different teams so that you don't have to, as IT, do everything. And then end users have the ability to access their own personal archive. And then, of course, one thing that we, of course, tout is the fact that messages are retrievable quick and easy. There's an indexing engine so that there's a near zero latency on being able to get to your archive. Here's an example of a search. So I started to just type in. The minute you start typing 3 letters or more, it's going to bring up suggested results. It's like a Google-like search, and then the results are highlighted in the archive, and you can narrow this. So in this particular search, you can see that there was email messages. There was right here, you've got a text message. Here was a BBM message. This is Facebook there. So you can see that it comes across. That's that idea of unified archiving, is that you do one unified search and it brings in all your communication into one access point. Um, so that is really the brunt of it, and I wanted to show this because that's where it really helps. That's where Retain is so powerful, is that you can do that one search, and it's an easy search, and you can find everything from one central location. And those eDiscovery tools are included.
Right, and I think as this year's Gartner Magic Quadrant, that was something they highlighted is the fact of how robust the e-discovery tools are that are included, and how that's a huge differentiator. Anyway, that takes me to my next question. And how is Retain different from other archiving solutions?
Yeah, so I know I mentioned that already, but the eDiscovery is a big one. Is being able to have that built-in eDiscovery, have redaction. A lot of solutions don't have that. Even some of the big major solutions, like as we know, those of you who are using Gmail and possibly using Google Vault, their eDiscovery is sorely lacking, and the same thing goes for Office 365, is it's lacking that redaction. Um, and that's included. And then of course, so some of the unique features is that eDiscovery, also the ability to have 5 ways to access it, as we talked about that web interface, the email plugin, a mobile app. I think I have a picture of that mobile app. Let me see. Yeah, so here's kind of the mobile app. It goes on iOS or Android. You can access that archive directly from that mobile app. Makes it easier to access, right? Um, then you have a standalone archive viewer, and what that is so that you can. And let me see. I'm going to show that really quick while we're here. I think I have it. So what this does is it actually allows you to do a search, export that search to a portable archive. So you put that, let's say you put it on a jump drive or you set it on a Dropbox. You can hand that off to another team if you don't want to give them rights to access the full archive. And then now with that archive viewer, they can redact from there. They can further export if they need to, and they can search that subset of the archive. So that's another unique feature of Retain. Um, let's see, we've got tagging. So there's smart, confidential, and rule-based tagging for messages. And then there's different ways. If you're going to the cloud, there's uh, private cloud, there's a partner cloud, and then it can also be done on a public cloud for the Retain archive. So that also is something that's different, is that we have those options. So depending on your needs in the cloud, we can fulfill that. I touched on the flexible archive access. Here is that idea once again of the unified archiving. That's one, like I said, that's what makes Retain different is you can do one search of one central archive and it's going to bring in multiple platforms. So that's really what makes Retain different from other archiving solutions.
We get this sometimes. If there are any other solutions that we have that might be helpful for schools.
So this is one thing that was brought up to us in the especially at ACPE, and that is this idea of what do I do about illicit images? So pornography, that's something that can be brought up. So how do I keep that out of my school? Right, and so we have a couple of solutions that I just wanted to touch on really quick just at the end here, and that's we have a solution called Secure Gateway. And what this solution does, it provides 0-hour antivirus, it provides anti-spam, it gives you inbound and outbound protection, and it works for any messaging platform, any email platform, excuse me. So Gmail, Office 365, Exchange, GroupWise, um, IBM Notes, and and it can work. What it does is it protects you, your email system from viruses, from spam, from cyber threats. It can also protect your network from DDoS attacks or DOS attacks. It gives you great network protection. And then one other part that's built in is with Image Analyzer, who's a partner of ours, you can actually monitor and prevent and block pornographic images from being propagated via your email system. So that's just another solution that kind of complements what we're talking about here with email archiving is this ability to provide security for your email system as well through the secure gateway. Something to take consideration of because we know that schools are concerned with these items and really need to protect themselves as well. And it's more robust than some of the built-in type things like that Gmail has or that Office 365 has. So it gives you that better protection, especially with the pornographic image blocking.
Awesome. Let's see. I just realized I was muted. Thank you. So this kind of leads us to. So what are my next steps? What do I need to do now?
So really, your next steps is, get a demo, get a personalized demo of how this would work for you. You can see how it can work in your school. They could give you some examples of any questions you might have of how it would work. Um, you can also get a quote for the solution. Visit retainarchiving.com. You can click on quote. You can click on demo, and you can go through that. You can also contact us, and we'd be happy to provide you with more information. Um, and as was mentioned earlier, we were recently acquired. The company used to be called Guava, but we were acquired by Micro Focus. That's why some of this stuff says Guava still. But you'll still be able to get to the right person by contacting us there. Uh, yeah, we'd be happy to win your business. Um, we know that this solution is really good for schools. We've had a number of schools in your area that have adopted it, and it really helps with that electronic communication and having that oversight.
Awesome. Let's see. I guess we sometimes we get this if we have any examples of organizations how they're using retain and how I guess to relate to how I might use it.
So yeah, there's a couple of. I'm going to just go over. I'll just give you a couple of quick ones. We don't want to go too long here. We did have a number of police departments that have adopted it recently, and that's because I've with what's been going on lately, the Department of Justice has wanted to have oversight on what they've been doing, and so we had one police department in particular that had some problems, and so they needed to produce all their email communication to the Department of Justice to prove that what they were doing was on the up and up. And at first they were kind of concerned because that's never something you want, but they had retain, and so they were able to easily and quickly get to the information and get the information in time and prove that they were on the right side, so that they did not. They were able to prove their case and prove that they were right. Some other things that we've had is we've had um, a rather large bank recently that has been moving everything over to have their employees using, especially their financial advisors, using mobile devices. And so they've deployed Retain to be able to have oversight on mobile. And it's been something that's been very good for them because they've been able to give their employees these mobile devices and make them mobile, and they can uh, easily have oversight on what's being said and done. So that's a couple examples that I wanted to give. And of course, we have a number of schools that are using it to have that oversight as well. Um, yeah, there's a few examples.
Awesome. Just let me check through the questions to make sure I didn't miss any. Just as a reminder, this was being recorded today, so look for that link. This webinar will be sent out for everybody in an email. I don't see anything else. Q, do you see anything?
No, I think we hit it all. So if you do have any questions that we didn't get to, you can feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be sure to answer those.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I just want to encourage you to visit our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/guava.tv. It's GWAVA TV. There's lots of other webinars and videos about this retain and other solutions there as well. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.